The timbered roofs of tiny Timberlane lay under early winter mist, the fog twining down the valley as though the mountains themselves exhaled. At the village edge, overlooking the silver ribbon of the creek, rose a gabled mansion whose every window glowed amber. Long ago it had housed a lumber baron. Now the building was the Timberlane Antique Toy Museum, a treasure box stuffed with dolls, tin soldiers, wind-up birds, and clockwork theatres. On this particular November evening, a lantern-lit banner rippled across the porch. Grand Puppet Gala, one night only. Inside, laughter mixed with the buzz of violin strings. Guests in brocade coats sipped mulled cider while admiring marionettes that dangled like jeweled spiders over the cedar stage. The Puppet Gala had been the dream of Clara Fell, the museum's youthful curator, whose love for toys bordered on religious devotion. She darted around in a crimson velvet dress, face aglow as if every nod of appreciation were a benediction. Tom Finch watched her from the edge of the crowd, adjusting his wire-rimmed spectacles. Tom was Timberlane's clockmaker, thin, meticulous, hair like burnished copper filings. During daylight, he repaired carriage clocks and cuckoos in the shop he had inherited from his father. At night, he preferred silence, but Clara had pressed a handwritten invitation into his palm weeks ago, begging him to attend. "Who else knows springs and gears the way you do?" she had said. "Besides, the marionettes will tap their little feet more smartly if you're there to hear." He could never refuse such earnestness. A hush fell upon the assembly when Clara stepped onto the stage. "Friends," she announced, "behold the crown of our collection, the Spina, the dancing sorceress." Velvet curtains parted. From the rafters descended a marionette nearly 3 feet tall, ivory face, emerald eyes, silver gown that glimmered like frost. She moved with eerie grace, arms swirling as though clouds pulled her hands. Gasps rose. Tom felt the hair lift on his knuckles. The mechanism was flawless. Clara guided the Spina through a final pirouette, then bowed. "Please enjoy the exhibit rooms. The closing tableau begins at midnight," she declared. Midnight never came for Clara Fell. An hour later, the clamour faded into shouts. Someone had found Clara backstage, slumped against a stack of prop trunks, throat tangled in a garret of marionette strings. The thin cords bit so deeply that the painted beads embedded into skin. Her eyes, once golden with curiosity, stared wide in question none could answer. Rain began to patter against the stained glass skylight. Within minutes, the museum swarmed with deputies from the county sheriff's office, their muddy boots clacking on parquet floors. Timberlane had known logging accidents, barn fires, an occasional drunken brawl, never murder. Guests huddled among rocking horses, while deputies took statements. Sheriff Harlan Greevy, built like an oak stump and just as taciturn, removed his hat and approached Tom. "Need your help. You knew her best," he muttered. Tom swallowed. "I repair gears and balance escapements, Sheriff. Not qualified for—" "Strings are gears stretched long ways," the sheriff said. "Besides, your DA solved that bank-safe riddle back in '09. Runs in blood." He nodded toward the darkened stage. "Scene's fragile. Won't move the body till we understand what cinched those cords." Tom felt a cold twist inside his ribs, but followed. Backstage smelled of velvet dust and rosewater. Clara sat against the trunks, head tilted, as though still listening for applause. 9 strings coiled around her neck, their free ends snaking upward into the rafters. The steel swivels of a ceiling pulley glinted. Tom fetched a footstool and climbed to examine the pulley. "These cords aren't original," he called down. Fresh hemp, waxed with carnauba for less friction. Deputy Maggs frowned. Meaning? Meaning someone replaced the original cotton strings on the spina with stronger hemp, ran them through this pulley and pulled from here. He pointed at the side wing where rigging ropes hung. A person could jerk hard once, then make it look like an accident if the body were found on stage, except Clara wasn't. Maggs scratched his chin. Why backstage? Tom stepped down. Perhaps she discovered the swap, confronted the wrong person, and was silenced before she could shout. Sheriff Greevy crossed his arms. List of folks with access. The entire Gala troupe, Tom said, and maybe half the trustees. The sheriff lifted a brow. Then you'll start tomorrow, Finch. I'll badge you as special consultant. Swear on your clocks you'll keep me informed. Tom glanced at Clara, then at the spina who now dangled still, strings frayed, body bereft of purpose. He nodded. I'll wind up the truth, he whispered, not entirely sure whom he was promising. Morning in Timberlane broke pale. The museum was sealed with yellow ribbon by the time Tom arrived, but the sheriff's badge opened doors. Inside, silence lay thick, broken only by the ticking of hundreds of displays. Clocks never slowed for grief. Tom made a list of persons to interview: puppeteers, trustees, employees, anyone with reason to resent Clara. He began with the travelling marionettist Percival Wicks, whose dramatic eyebrows and sapphire waistcoat declared perpetual performance. Percival's lodging at the Maplewick Inn was ornate and cluttered with puppet limbs. He lounged upon a chaise, practising finger manoeuvres. Tragedy of tragedies, he cried. Poor dear Clara. Tom lifted a fallen arm of a marionette shaped like a jester. Where were you at 11:30? On stage, sir. My Pierrot lamented at precisely that moment. The crowd wept. Tom considered. Did you alter any strings on the spina? Percival fluttered a hand. Artists do not tamper with colleagues' tools. Besides, Clara forbade unsanctioned adjustments. He leaned forward, tone lowering. But you should speak to Eunice Hart, the board chair. She coveted the museum's insurance payout like a jackdaw eyes a coin. Eunice Hart's office overlooked the river, its panelled walls lined with ledgers instead of toys. She greeted Tom briskly. Anything to speed closure, she said, smoothing silver hair. She produced balance sheets. The gala was costly. Clara exceeded budget again. Had she lived, we'd be negotiating her resignation. Motivation flickered. Tom asked about the spina. Eunice waved it off. Old puppet, high appraisal, but our real treasure is the Laughing Prince, an 18th century clockwork automaton. She opened a safe and showed Tom a walnut box containing a tiny silver jester in repose. One wins him, he sits up and laughs thrice. Worth a fortune. Only 4 exist worldwide. Was that on display last night? It was to be revealed at midnight, but Clara insisted secrecy. Eunice locked it away. Now I must safeguard it until we decide whether to sell. Our funds dwindle. Tom felt a faint chill. In his notebook he wrote, money. Next he visited Julian Gray, the museum's docent and historian, a lanky man with spectacles rounder than Tom's, voice low as page rustle. Julian sat among stacks of catalogue cards. Clara's death is a wound to heritage, he said. Did she conflict with anyone? Tom asked. Julian shrugged. She conflicted with budgets, schedules, dust regulations. But her zeal was the fire that kept us warm. He hesitated. I heard raised voices between her and an outsider 2 days ago. A collector, Milo Frost. He wanted to acquire Thespina. She refused. Outside the research room, Tom's steps slowed. motive lines tangled like marionette strings: greed, ambition, resentment. But mechanical clues still hummed. He returned to the stage. He hoisted himself into the flyloft, where counterweights and pulleys hid in gloom. A faint glint caught his eye, a smear of dark wax on the pulley's rim. He scraped some onto a matchbox. Carnauba Plus, something aromatic like pine tar. He descended into the workshop where museum technicians repaired toys. On a bench lay spools of hemp cord, tubs of wax and carving chisels. Only one wax smelled of pine, used to waterproof outdoor display banners. So the murderer used wax from this workshop, Tom murmured, meaning opportunity, not just motive. The afternoon brought a new wrinkle. Sheriff Greevy summoned Tom to Clara's apartment above the carriage house. Among her notebooks lay a torn telegram. Have located secret compartment, stop examine after Gala. Stop notify no one stop. Secret compartment? Tom scoured her notes. One page titled LP Ort showed sketches of a cylindrical spring and mirrored panels. LP Ort, Laughing Prince automaton. She believed it held a hidden element. He hurried to the safe in Eunice Hart's office, but she was out. Julian admitted him. The Laughing Prince sat inert, cap of mother-of-pearl winking. Tom wound the key. The figure lifted, mouth agape, laughter tinkle. Then it clunked, froze, and a sliver of brass slid from under the seat, something new. Tom gingerly drew it out. A paper-thin cog, etched with fleur-de-lis and an inscription, "For the heir who hears." Julian gasped. Clara suspected this. She said the automaton contained a message from its maker. Tom turned the automaton over. The compartment from which the cog slid had been recently filed, teeth marks fresh. Someone tried to remove this before fully understanding how, he said. Perhaps last night, when Gala chaos distracted. If Clara had discovered tampering, she might have confronted the thief, thus her death. Who besides Eunice and Julian had access to the safe? Clara, of course, and one other, the appointed key holder for the Gala's insurance requirement, Sheriff Greevy himself. But the sheriff's waxy fingerprints were more likely on doughnuts than on pine tar hemp. Tom's thoughts returned to Milo Frost, the collector. He examined the museum's guest ledger. Frost had signed in at 5 o'clock, then erased his line, rewriting it lower as though to obscure the time. Footsteps approached, the sheriff, coat speckled with rain. "Finch, we found Frost," he said grimly. "Dead in his hotel, wrist slashed. Suicide notes mention guilt over a failed acquisition." Tom clenched his jaw. "Too convenient. Stage 1 scapegoat," he muttered. That evening he sat in his clock shop, surrounded by brass gears ticking like beetle wings, reviewing evidence. Hemp cord waxed with pine, workshop supply. Pulley arranged from fly loft, knowledge of stagecraft. Safe access for Laughing Prince, museum authority. Frost's abrupt death, staged. A knock rattled the glass door. Julian Gray stood there, soaked. "Tom, I must show you something." He produced a miniature scroll of parchment. "I found it behind volume 6 of our puppet catalogues." Clara hid it. The curled script was in Latin. They bent over the bench lamp, translating. It described a second mechanism in the Laughing Prince. When a certain cog was replaced while the automaton laughed, a jewel capsule would emerge from the mouth, the heart of the prince. Clara had annotated, "Possible lost ruby of Bourbon line." Tom's heart pounded. A priceless gem inside a toy, a theft hidden by murder. He thanked Julian, but as the historian left, Tom noticed pine tar wax on Julian's wrist cuff, glinting in lamplight. Snow began to fall the next morning, muting Timberlane into a monochrome postcard. Tom requested a meeting of all principals inside the museum's grand hall. Puppets and dolls stared from balconies like silent jury. Eunice Hart arrived first, pinched and impatient. Percival lounged dramatically under a balcony. Sheriff Greevy rumbled in with deputies. Julian Gray entered last, hands tucked in coat pockets. Tom mounted the stage beside the Spina's empty rig. "We gather to honor Clara Fell and to unmask her killer," he began, voice quivering. "The clues are mechanical, not mystical. Gears do not lie." He held up the pine-smudged matchbox. "The murderer restrung the spina with hemp waxed by this blend. Only people who used the workshop knew of that wax. Of those, one possessed both rigging knowledge and safe access. That person is Julian Gray." Gasps. Julian's eyes widened behind spectacles. "Absurd! I loved Clara like a sister." Tom continued. "You staged Frost's suicide to deflect blame. He tried to buy Thespina, maybe saw you tampering, so you silenced him too. But the wax betrayed you." Tom reached inside his satchel, producing Julian's cuff showing sticky residue. "I removed this from the coat you left drying in the staff cloakroom." Julian's expression hardened. "Circumstantial. Then allow the laughing prince to testify." Tom set the automaton on a table. He inserted the fleur-de-lis cog. "This is what you sought." He wound the key. The tiny prince sat up, laughed once, ha-ha, twice, ha-ha. Then, at the third laugh, a hidden hatch in its mouth slid open, and a pea-sized ruby popped onto the table. Eunice gasped. The sheriff whistled. Tom glanced at Julian. Clara discovered the ruby was real. She planned to announce it at midnight, ensuring the museum retained ownership. You wanted it for yourself, to erase debts or buy fame. You tried to extract the cog earlier, but the mechanism jammed. When Clara confronted you backstage, you used the Spina's reinforced strings and overhead pulley to strangle her quickly and quietly. Julian's lips trembled. Then he bolted for the side aisle. Deputy Maggs tackled him beneath a rocking horse exhibit. The ruby skittered across the floor until Tom retrieved it with a handkerchief. After deputies cuffed Julian, Sheriff Greevy addressed the stunned assembly. "Justice, like a good clock, takes tinkering," he said gruffly, clapping Tom's shoulder. With Julian jailed and the ruby locked beyond temptation, the museum reopened a week later for a candlelight vigil. Snow melted into rain that pattered on the roof as townsfolk flowed between exhibits, speaking Clara's name in hushed gratitude. Tom lingered by Thespina, now restored with cotton strings of original weave. He pulled a lever. The puppet's arms lifted, head bowed as if mourning. Eunice Hart approached him. "The board voted to appoint you interim curator," she said softly. "Your eye for mechanisms saved us. Consider it." Tom gazed at the puppet's glass eyes. "I mend clocks. Museums require curators with larger hearts." "Clara saw yours," Eunice replied. She kept a note. She handed him a folded page from Clara's journal. "Tom understands how time breathes inside toys. If anything happens to me, trust him to guard their voices." Tom closed his eyes. He pictured Clara backstage, breathing excitement, never suspecting betrayal. He straightened. "All right. But only interim," he conceded. Soon children would return, pointing at tin swans, listening to pocket-sized music boxes, marveling that wrought brass and springs could sing. Time, too, would keep singing, sometimes in sorrowful keys, sometimes bright. And when marionette strings fluttered above the cedar stage, Tom Finch would be there, winding the shows, ensuring that no chord ever again carried the weight of malice.